Welcome to Madrid Soundscape, a format created to discover the diversity of the south of Madrid. This podcast is made by students from the Carlos III University in Madrid, more specifically the subject of local journalism. And I'm not doing this alone because I'm with the best company I could ever have. Say hi, guys!
My name is Nate Hendon. My full name is Nathan, but I go by Nate. I'm from University of Wisconsin, back in the United States. Studying abroad here this semester, doing an exchange program here at Carlos de Santa. And as Victor said, we have the best company here. And so I'm quite excited to talk about Madrid Soundscape.
Hi, my name is Fritz Ryle. I go to Wisconsin as well, and I'm formerly from Minnesota. Great company, really excited to talk about Spain and all the great adventures we've had here in Spain.
Well, my name is Victor Lopez. I guess you could call me the Spanish one because I'm surrounded by people from the States. It's interesting that none of us was born here in Madrid, but I feel we have all of us a common ground, a common cause, discovering the south of Madrid, an unknown region for lots of people, and I would say a very interesting one, right guys?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because, like you said, none of us are from the south, none of us are from Madrid, and so we're kind of coming in with a little bit of an outside perspective, and I think it'll be very interesting for our listeners to hear about what we think about the south parts of Madrid.
Yeah, I think it'll be cool, especially coming from the United States. Typically we just see the big cities, so it'll be really interesting to kind of dive into the smaller towns around the big cities.
Right, so prior to the release of our podcast, we ask our listeners or our followers in social media, Madrid Soundscape in Instagram, about what would they like to know about the south of Madrid. And Nate, do we have a question, a very interesting question, right?
We do have an interesting question. We got this from one of our followers on Instagram. It was from Laura. It was, what are the main differences between the north and the south of Madrid?
So Fritz, you are an international student, as you said. You come from Wisconsin. You've been here in Madrid since January, February, I guess. So what were your impressions of Madrid? I think you've been both in the north and in the south. We're recording this from the south of Madrid in Getafe.
Yes.
So what are the things you think are different between the different parts of the region?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. For Madrid itself, like the heart of the city, you can just tell there's so many people there. It's a very diverse culture, and there's people from everywhere. I see people from the US, I hear English, I hear Spanish. Of course I hear Spanish in Madrid, but I also hear languages like Chinese and all these other languages. You can just tell there's a lot of culture and a lot of people from around the world. And there's also just a bunch of different cuisines and different things to do. When I go to the south and north, I see a little bit more of like the heart of Spain, like what I really expected to see when I came to Madrid. It's not that I don't see that in Madrid, but I just see a lot more of that kind of true culture and all that's kind of encompassed in Spain in those smaller towns around Madrid.
I can agree with you more. Like, being in Madrid, it's just, there's a bunch of people from all different areas, and it's a big city. If you go to the US, it's New York, it's Chicago, it's one of the biggest cities in Europe. But then when I was in the South this past weekend, it was so different. I felt like I was almost in like my hometown in Colorado, where I'm from, where in the city, it's people from all over, but that was really people from Spain, people from the South, people from Villaconejos, where I was, and I really can't wait to tell you guys about my experience there because it was one of my favorite days abroad so far.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you guys because, for example, in the north of Madrid, it's true we have like that cold weather, whereas in the south we're feeling a little bit warm right now. I don't know how many degrees we are, well, I guess like almost 30 degrees. The spring has arrived. And yeah, in the south of in the south of Madrid, we can find villages with less population than in the north, and actually with less income. I don't know what you guys think about that kind of imbalance between the north and the south.
Yeah, I think from what I've noticed a little bit, like when we were up in the north a couple weeks ago, it seemed like there was a lot of vacation. Remember, when we went to Miraflores de la Sierra, there was a lot of vacation homes.
Yeah,
and it was way more so, like people went out to those villages to vacation, and the wealth there was wealth from people who live there, but then also from people who just are there on vacation, have a second home there. And in the south, it seemed a lot more local. I wouldn't even say it's a lot like income-wise.
Do you think it's more friendly the south than the north, or?
I personally did. Maybe it was just our experience. Like I mean, the people who welcomed us at the soccer field that we were at were so nice. They were amazing people, and it like really made me feel at home. Even one guy spoke perfect English and was able to communicate with me, and it was great. But I think, to answer your question, yes. Like I felt like everybody was a little bit more friendly in the South than they were.
Fritz, you for example, did you find difficulties when talking to people, when trying to communicate with them? Do you think that people in the North or in the South, like, they have more ability to talk English with you?
You know, that's a great question. I think when we went to the North, we actually went to a soccer field as well, and we interviewed this soccer group, and they were really nice. And I speak Spanish a little bit, but it's definitely not great. And so some stuff gets lost in translation, but they were definitely willing to kind of re-explain stuff and kind of help me whenever I needed some help Spanish-wise, and kind of speak slowly when I needed it. When calling the South, I haven't actually been to the south of Madrid yet. I'm going tomorrow, but when I called and tried to set up some interviews, the first call was great. She was super helpful, spoke slowly so I could understand, and kind of helps me through the conversation. When I called to follow up about my interview, I spoke with someone else and kind of had some difficulties. They weren't really kind of giving me the time of day to understand me. And so I think in that realm like that, I had the kind of the experience of the good and the bad at the South, but only good with the North. So I think in my experience, it's really just about who you talk to, more about where you're at.
Victor, what about like for you as somebody who your native language is Spanish? Because when we come in and we're asking questions, I mean, I was full out using Google Translate to email back and forth and trying to coordinate stuff, and the girls that I went with to the village were super helpful. But for you, did you feel a different experience? Like I think when we explained that we were international students, we didn't speak very good Spanish, they're a little bit more willing to help us. But for you, are they, like, where would you say the difference lies?
Well, I have to tell you guys about my story. I'm from the south of Spain. I'm from Andalusia, that region that's known for flamenco, known for sunny weather, known for salmorejo and good food. But yeah, I come from a little village, so I feel more attached to those kind of villages we are covering in the Madrid Southcape. But yeah, when you, for example, go to the south of Madrid, you find people that maybe it's more warm, like as the weather, they are trying to offer you more help. And then you go to the north and people, they can be also warm people that try to help you. But you know, you find differences when talking to them. You find different ways of behaving, different ways of dealing with life, different ways of dealing with people and communication. So I think that it's not only in Madrid, but something we find in Spain, or I think maybe in the US too, because Wisconsin is I think in the border with Canada, and I don't know if there are differences between Wisconsin and Texas, for example.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah,
lots of differences.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, even in Minnesota's known for being like Minnesota nice, like that's kind of a thing they say in the US. And most people, especially in the suburbs where I live, everyone is very nice. But if you go to the main city, like in comparing it to Spain, it'd be like going to Madrid. I mean, some people just aren't nice there and don't have the time of day, and they're focused on their work. There's differences kind of everywhere, but for me, like in my suburbs, everyone's very nice, and kind of you definitely have that contrast of nice people and people who are willing to help you, and other people who are just kind of focused on themselves.
Yeah, and off that point, a lot of it, like we talked about income-wise, sometimes it's even based on income. Like if you go to somewhere that's wealthy, people are sometimes a little bit less likely to talk to you if they can tell that you don't come from that type of wealth. And so, I mean, I don't know if it's the same thing in Spain, but I don't know, like in my hometown, you just see this distribution everywhere. And I think like some people are friendly based on like if they know you're at that certain income level that they are, but if they know you don't have as much money as they do, or some people who have more money, they're like less willing to talk to each other, be more friendly. I mean, I see this in my hometown, especially where the areas where there's a ton of wealth, those people all group together, they stay together, they're not as friendly, but then the other areas are kind of their own little groups. And so I really think it's super interesting to just see like the distribution of wealth. And Victor, like you were saying, in all of the US, there's people in the South are way different from people in the North. People from California are different from people in New York. And especially at a university like ours, it's cool to see everybody interact. And like at a university like Wisconsin, we see people interact, but even now being at Carlos Teixeira, you're learning about people from
the North or every part in the world. I think the world comes together here in the Carlos Teixeira University. So yeah, guys,
Right, I think one thing just to add on that, with kind of the distribution of wealth, I thought it was super interesting when we were looking at Miraflores de la Sierra, is like Nate said earlier, like there's a lot of houses there that are just vacation homes. And so when we went, like it was probably 3 or 4 in the afternoon, so it was kind of like siesta hour. At least that's what Nate and I call it. Like I don't know if that's what you guys call it here.
Yeah,
Is that what you call it? Okay, yeah, okay, good. Okay, that's what I thought.
The siesta is culture, guys.
Yeah.
Don't feel ashamed to talk
We're
about
learning,
it.
we're learning,
Yeah.
we're learning. But we were so surprised because nobody was in the streets, and we were kind of like, we were looking for people to talk to, and there's just no one out. And then we kind of put 2 and 2 together. But another reason for that was just the fact that like their population grows 3 times its size in the summer when these people go there for vacation or for the summer. And I don't, as far as I'm concerned, as far as like from what I've seen, that doesn't really happen in the South. And so I think when you go to the South, you really get people who like grew up there, live there, and like spend a lot of their time there. Whereas when you go to the North, you kind of get some people who are used to tourists and people who might not respect their culture as much. And maybe that's why they're a little bit more standoffy to new people who are coming in.
Yeah, because you go to the South, and the South is really related to tradition, and there has been always this myth of the South being the tradition and the North being the innovation. We found that in, I think, every country, I think in every city, every region of this world. And yeah, so, well, as we've been saying, the Madrid region is full of diversity. And that, in fact, makes each village unique in its own way. And I think each of you have a special village because we are giving you, showcasing 2 villages during each episode, so you guys can learn about okay.
Yeah, why, like what makes each village
I'm
special?
going to start again that part, okay? So,
Okay.
Okay, so guys, yes, we've been saying the Madrid region is full of diversity, and in fact, that makes each village unique in its own way. And during each episode, we'll be showcasing 2 villages that we will be covering in our newspaper, in the Madrid Soundscape podcast, and the Madrid Soundscape web. So, Fritz, which village do you have for us today?
So the village I'm talking about today is El Alamo, and a little bit of history. It was created in the year 1600. Yeah, and the one thing I really want to talk about, which I think is just super interesting, and it kind of reminded me of Pamplona's like tomato war fight,
Yeah.
which I've always found super fascinating coming from the U.S. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about that, and then we can kind of go off that. But from what we heard from Sophia is that at Christmas time, they used to make a bonfire in the big towns. It was a great tradition, and although it maintained in some towns, in others it has been lost. And so the way it used to work is on December 31st, they made a huge bonfire the size of a 2-story house, and the next day they would make a war of oranges, similar to the Tomatina de Bonyol, where people throw tomatoes at each other. So there was a battle of oranges of the Quintos against the rest of the town. It was a custom that existed years ago and disappeared not so long ago. And so I'm just kind of sad that they lost it, because I've always thought that, Pamplona, that orange, or the fight with tomatoes is so cool and such a cool piece of history and like
Yeah,
culture.
but the tomatina,
Yeah.
it's not from Pamplona, right?
It's not?
It's not, it's in Valencia, the tomatina.
No, it's in Valencia?
Yeah, Pamplona is for the encierros,
The bullfight, or the bull
the
run?
races with the bulls.
So the tomato fight is in Valencia.
This is what the podcast was made for. So
Hey, we're learning
you have
right
people
now.
learning. It's not only from talking to you guys; it's from learning also ourselves. So yeah, the Buñol is a village in the community of Valencia, and there you have like the tomatina, that annual battle of tomatoes. But Pamplona is
Okay,
not.
so I will not go to
Yeah.
Pamplona in search of the tomato
Well,
fight.
at least I've never heard of this. This is
You've never heard of it?
No, I never heard
No.
of this. This is awesome.
I think this was like a worldwide thing known of the fighting with tomatoes.
Maybe for everybody.
Well, Nate's
everybody else-
not the brightest.
Yeah,
so,
I'm not.
you know.
I don't know that much, so maybe. But yeah, I never heard of that. That's
But would you guys participate in one? Would you like guys to participate in one battle like that? with
yes,
tomatoes?
that sounds awesome.
Okay, here's the better question though. Would you rather be in the fight of oranges or the fight of tomatoes?
Ooh,
Mm,
the oranges would hurt. Like, right?
That's
If
what I was
somebody
thinking.
throws an orange at you, dude,
Yeah,
I'm
but-
taking. Like,
I was
don't know if
thinking
can
but
orange
I
as well.
like more they are sweetener, the oranges, and I would like more if they
True.
throw me one at the
But-
mouth.
Okay, wait. This is another question. Side note, and then we'll get back to that.
Okay.
Tomatoes are people love tomatoes or people cannot stand tomatoes? Are you guys tomato people?
I don't know in the US, guys, but here in Spain, I think we have a culture based on tomatoes. We have dishes like gazpacho or salmorejo, or we like to make salads, lots of salads. I don't know in the US, but I would think we have like the tomato is well received here in Spain.
Okay.
I like tomatoes. I think the tomatoes here are much better than in the US. Like I've been eating a lot more tomatoes here. In the US, I typically don't eat tomatoes as much.
No?
No.
I love tomatoes.
In a salad or a sandwich, maybe, but like I wouldn't go out of my way to get a tomato.
I feel like there's three types of people. There's the people who love tomatoes. There's the middle people who won't eat a plain tomato.
And the people with bad taste.
Yeah, and then the people with bad taste. But yeah, sorry. Back to the oranges.
Well, so I think if I got hit with an orange, like I think I'd like it more because it would taste better. And like it would just be a better fruit. But I think one, it would hurt more, and two, like the citrus, it would be so sticky, and I'd be so like gross. I think the tomato would be easier to clean.
Yeah, but the tomato would just hit you and it'd splat, like it'd go everywhere. Like
I think the orange would. Do they peel them?
I think the fun part is not getting worried about if you get dirty and if it
Yes.
goes like boom.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, this sounds. I need to come back to Spain for this.
Yeah.
But this is so cool. You have New Year's Eve on December 31st, and then all of a sudden, right after that, you have this awesome celebration. I mean, I feel like normally New Year's Day is just relaxing. You're not doing so much. You had a big night the night before.
Yeah, you're doing your New Year's resolution, and instead of that in this village today, I'm throwing tomatoes at each other.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Nate, you have another village, and you have talked about it. You went to Villaconejos last weekend, so tell us about it.
Guys, I had the best time this last weekend. I was on my way there. I was by myself. I don't speak very good Spanish. I was nervous, like I was gonna miss the bus. And I texted Fritz and I was like, dude, this is like, what's going on? Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Got there and we just had the best day. I was with two of my classmates, and the village is amazing. Like it's a pretty small village. There's only about 3,363 people based on the 2018 census. And back in the past, there's a hunting village. There's a ton of rabbits. That's where the name actually comes from. And so people, like, as people learned that there was tons of rabbits, there was tons of hunting, they came to Villaconejos. And then all of a sudden, once too many people came, it was, like similar to gold rushes. I don't know if, like, there was gold rushes back in the U.S. where once too many people came, the gold went away. And this kind of is what happened in the village. And since then, people have lived there. And
Were people hunting these? You said rabbits, right?
Yeah, rabbits.
Were they hunting them for like sport, like for fun, or were they hunting them to eat, or like what was the situation there? Or did you guys not talk too much about it?
I didn't really discover necessarily what they were, but it seemed like it was a little bit of a mix of both.
Kind of sport.
Yeah,
too.
but I'm assuming if people were coming out, like tons of people were coming out there to hunt the rabbits, it was partially for money because you're not going to move to somewhere else just because, like, it's the same way people.
Yeah, in villages, you have like. Your main business can be either agriculture or raising livestock, and I think maybe here is like try to hunt rabbits to sell them in other villages, maybe.
Yeah.
And side question to this, I don't know, guys, what do you feel about, for example, Spain having this kind of original names for villages like Villaconejos? In translated to English, it would be like Rabbit Village or Rabbit City.
Yeah.
I don't know in the US if you have like that type of original names.
So my city is called Minnetonka, and I believe it translates into like a Native American language directly to Big Lake. So we kind of have the same thing, and then other places we don't. But I like it. I think it's cool. I think it kind of adds a bit of history. I think that's something the U.S. kind of lacks just because it hasn't been around that long.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, there's definitely certain cities and certain even states in general that are named after certain people or certain origins, but I think this is cool. I mean, the villagers probably went there. That's what they were describing it as in the name stuck. But yeah, this village was awesome. Everybody was so welcoming. Like, we went to a soccer match because that was where I was writing one of my stories. And it was, first of all, it was crazy. Like, it was a junior kids soccer match, the first thing that we saw. Like, probably 6 to 7 year old boys, and parents were so into it, like screaming, yelling. The kids were into it. Like, the kid went down and like it wasn't even a flop. Like, he took a bad foul and is like rolling on the ground like a professional player. Like,
yeah.
It was great. And we met this woman, Alejandra, who was the director of the women's football team. And that's what this story that you guys are going to get to read at some point is all about. It's really all about the feature of this soccer team. And it's cool because this team is made up of a bunch of different villages around Villaconejos because they didn't have enough people in that village to necessarily make a women's soccer team. But yeah, back to everything. They were so welcoming. They bought us like waters. They bought us. I tried the Sevillian gin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the guy was like, you have to have he got a coffee that was like his favorite like alcoholic coffee.
Yeah.
And he really wanted me to try the Sevillian gin, so I had a little sip of it, and it was really
like
great there. I did, and I'm not.
You don't like gin?
I don't like gin. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really liked it. I had a little gin and tonic with it, and did not expect to have a drink while I was in Villaconejos, but.
Yeah, guys, we've talked previously about oranges and tomatoes, but what would you choose? Oranges, tomatoes, or melons? Because we have in Villaconejos.
I didn't even mention the melon.
I don't know if you guys have listened about this or if you have seen a kind of museum like this one, but we have a melon museum in Villaconejos, right?
What? Yeah. Well, so my group mates text me, like, I was like, where should I meet them? Because they got there a little bit before I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, where should I meet them? And they're like, we're at the Melon Museum. And I was like, Melon Museum?
Like all melons, like watermelon, like all types of melons?
It was, I think it was mostly like the agricultural sector there was based off of melons. But I was so confused. I was on the bus and I was like, is this like, did they text the wrong person or like what's going on?
Yeah.
Got there. It's a really nice museum. It was actually funny while we were in there. I was like, yeah, I think I know some Spanish. And they're like, okay, read this for me. And I was like, I felt like I was back in like high school, like reading and like picking out the little words, and I was able to understand a little bit of it. But
let's go.
Yeah, it was a cool museum. They were having a march for the Sahara.
Yeah, we will talking about this later.
Yeah.
I think now it's time for talking a little bit about two questions that we've come up with. Guys, have you ever found difficulties for traveling between your home and your workplace? Because here in between villages and main cities, maybe we found difficulties, maybe not. I don't know what you guys think, or if you have any kind of stories.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I live in kind of the suburbs of Minnesota, and pretty much everyone in Minnesota, I think like Colorado too, I think it's pretty common all around the U.S., like everyone has cars. And so my family has 3 cars. My parents each have their own, and us kids, I have a brother and a sister, we share a car. And so we drive to work. Like, the only issue I really have is if like my brother has the car, then we're gonna need to carpool or drive together. But there's no subways around us. There's not really like trains really. No. There's not really, like if I wanted to go to Colorado, I'm gonna drive to the airport and hop on a flight, 100%.
Yeah.
The only trains in the U.S. are like cargo trains that are moving, like rocks.
Yeah.
But
if we're on the East Coast, like you might train from. I know people who train from like D.C. to Philadelphia or Washington D.C. to Philadelphia or to New York.
Yeah, and if you're in New York, like I know a lot of people in New York, similar to Madrid, because here like a lot of people don't even have their driver's license or a car.
Yeah, I don't have my driver's license. I don't think I could survive in the U.S. without my driver's license. So yeah, I find, for example, that very interesting because, as I've said before, I come from a little village, and from going back to the city where my high school was, I have to take a bus, and my bus, I think the time span between one bus and another, it was like 2 hours. So you guys, it's very difficult for people from the villages to go from one place to another. I think the government should apply some measures to improve that situation. And you, Nate, what do you?
Yeah, I mean, because my story is pretty similar to Fritz's, but I've really felt it differently here in Madrid. And even though Fritz and I both live in the city, and so we live around the Sol area. So every time we're coming to school, we're taking the C4 train.
Yeah, the Renfe, the famous Renfe. The Renfe everyone loves.
But there's I've showed up late to class 3, 4, 5, multiple times just because I get to the Atocha train station and the Parla train is not working or it stops or...
It's always the train's fault too.
Yeah,
we're never running late.
Never running late.
The train always causes the issue.
Yeah. Do you think there will be this kind of problems in the States or not? With strikes from the syndicates of transport and that kind of stuff?
We have strikes for schools and stuff. The thing about the U.S. is our transportation system is just so drastically different that No, I mean a lot of like the only time I've ever been on a subway or a train or anything like that is if I'm in the city within like maybe a mile of the heart of the city. Besides that, everyone's driving. You typically drive in and out of the city regardless. I don't even think there's a train that goes to it. The only time I ever get on a bus even is if I get on a bus back from Wisconsin to Minnesota because it's a 4-hour drive. And even then, like most of the time I know someone who's driving home to Minnesota. So
I think because we're from suburbs and like we're not from the actual city, we don't feel it as much. But I think if you're from a big city like New York, like Madrid, even like Italy, I know has major problems with their transportation. And so I think if you live in those big cities, you definitely feel some issues. The biggest difference I think is that if you know you have to travel from one place to another, like this weekend when I was going to Villaconejos, I knew I had to make this, I think it was like the C7 train. And if I missed it, I was going to be late to the village. I was going to miss the bus. And so it's really interesting, I mean, to relate this to the South. If you need to get to Madrid because you're going to the Real Madrid game or you have a dinner or you have something in Madrid and you miss that first bus, you might not make it. And so I think like it's really interesting to see like how many people have cars out there. And even one of the guys I talked to at the soccer match, his name is Juan. I didn't quite get his last name, but he was saying he drives into the city every day. And it's a 45-minute to an hour commute with no traffic. When there's traffic, I mean, Victor, how's the traffic? Because we don't drive.
Traffic in Madrid is chaos, is despair, is everything bad in this life.
Yeah.
You know, guys, like, for example, when I'm with my parents and they decide to let's get dinner in Madrid or let's get dinner near the city, it's a nightmare. It's something that, for example, you don't find in the villages because people like. I think that's a very good point, like an advantage for them because they have more accessibility, at least to the business they have in their town. But it's true that it can become a real problem when they don't have something in their town and they have to travel to somewhere else to get their business done. So
we've seen bad traffic, even just like we were running late for a flight and we decided to take an Uber to the airport. And then the Uber took like almost twice as long as the train because there was so much traffic. We got stuck behind a construction zone, and then there was a spot with a bunch of cars. Like, it was like I really saw how bad the traffic can get. Because I mean, the roads compared to the U.S. are teeny. Like they are so small, and so I mean, it makes sense why there's so much traffic.
But okay, so this is, and I'm not from here, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Really? You're
really?
not?
No, I'm not.
No.
So what I've heard is the government wants like the CO2 levels are really bad in Madrid.
yeah,
And when I go on runs, I've
we
noticed
have
it.
a real problem of pollution.
Yeah, but so one of the issues is you have people from these villages who are, if they have to commute into the city for work, they're taking their car because they're not going to take public transport because if I miss my 12:17 bus, the next bus is at 3:17, and so I'm going to be 3 hours late to work. And so I feel like the government has to do something that if you want to incentivize getting rid of CO2, you need to invest into the public transport system because then you won't have as many cars on the street, and because you have more of the I can't think of the word for it. Carpooling. Sorry.
Yes.
Like carpooling through train, through buses, that kind of ideology. So I don't know. I think it's maybe that's, and I know the people from the South. I wonder if they have the same opinion. Like there needs to be some changes with the public transport.
And guys, Nate, you have talked about a march that was made in a village. And guys, I want to know if you have ever participated in a march. What do you think people should march and protest for in the south of Madrid? So I don't know who wants to start. I can start.
I would love to hear what you think, especially about the south of Madrid, because I don't know exactly what I think they should protest for, or march for. But in my opinion, if you're gonna march, I think it should be something you really care about, and I think it should be something that is very important to you and the people around you. I personally haven't participated in March. I'm from the suburbs. There's not a lot of marches. There's not a lot of marches in my area. And if there has been a march or something going on, it's typically something I'm not affiliated with, or I'm just not in the circle to even be.
Do you think
connected.
the most of marches that you've seen in your hometown are political related and it's not
Yeah.
like of a
Yeah.
matter related to society and
I'd say it's almost always politically related.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like the climate gets related to politics too, because that's a huge political thing. So, I mean, if you're counting that, I think then definitely, yeah, it's all kind of correlated to politics and how the U.S. government is running things.
Yeah.
in my case, for example, I don't know, maybe you've heard about it, the Fridays for Future March that they were very trendy like some years ago, like in 2019. Yeah, I participated in, well, only in one. I feel like, yeah, it was a very interesting experience. I think like you feel like you're defending an important cause. You are like claiming for a very an improvement of the situation, and you are also claiming for the government of taking measures and taking part in the problem. And I think people in the south of Madrid, when you think about the south of Madrid, you think people like they are going to make participate in a march for their own sake, for things like they matter to them, for better transport, for better I don't know, for a better health system, better education. Because, for example, in the south of Madrid and in villages in the empty Spain, we found less and less children. So we have a problem of education there. And yeah, I think that it can be really interesting to see people also in the south of Madrid participating in another kind of marches and protests, like for global problematics, as you said, and we're gonna get later into that. And I don't know, Nate, what do you think about it?
I think I agree with a lot of what you guys have said. I think one of the things that I'd add is if you're gonna march, it needs to be a peaceful a peaceful march, a peaceful protest, because if you care about this issue so much and you're going to march and then it turns deadly or it turns to destroy. I mean, in Minnesota a couple years ago, people were marching for the BLM protest, the Black Lives Matter, and you saw like the protest. I mean, not every protest was violent, but there was a couple protests that got extremely violent and they were destroying businesses, and so then people looked at those protests differently because of how they, instead of protesting for what they believed in, they were protesting and then destroying stuff. So I think if you're gonna go protest, there has to be a peaceful side of it, and like you guys said, it's something you care about. I mean, you shouldn't just go to a protest because your friends are like you.
Exactly.
And I mean, I like, to answer the question, I remember I went to one, and it wasn't really a protest. It was like junior year of high school or senior year, and there was a walkout from class, and I think it was because of I think it was a school shooting, because the U.S. had a problem with, and still does, of gun violence.
Have you been guys in school?
No, and I hope I never am. But there's a couple in around my area, and so I think we had a walkout for that, and I participated in it just because I cared about it, but also everybody else was participating in it, so I felt like I needed to. And I think yes, that happens to people, but I think if you care about the issue, you protest, and if you don't, there's no,
Yeah, I was just going to say, especially going back to the peace thing and being a peaceful protest or a peaceful march, in Minnesota, it got really, really bad, especially after the murder of George Floyd and all those horrible things that happened, to the point where these marches weren't just hey, we need to change this, hey, we need to figure it out. They were screaming no justice, no peace, and destroying police stations. And we would have curfews at 8, 10, sometimes even 5 p.m. just to keep people inside and try and keep people safe. And so I think it's really important, especially with these, like Nate said, to keep them peaceful and to make sure, if you're going out there and you're causing more harm, you're weakening your argument, and the possibility of you actually doing any good is so much less likely. And so I think having that peaceful protest and really trying to make a change versus just saying words, I feel like sometimes the protests that I've seen in the US, it's people just kind of screaming without any plan or action. And it's kind of just if you're proposing an issue without a solution, you're complaining.
Yeah.
So, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of my opinion on it. But I think if I ever felt strongly enough about something and it was, say, someone had a plan and we want to do this and it's marching to get attention for our plan and get signatures and kind of create actual momentum towards an actual process, then it makes sense. But I think a lot of times, especially in the US, it's more so just people, from my experience, and maybe I haven't seen the good ones, but I feel like a lot of times it's more so just people yelling versus actually getting a good point across.
Well, when I was in Villaconejos, it was either they were about to start going on a march or they were planning one. But we were at the Mellon Museum. There was a meetup of people. There was a solidarity march to raise money for the Western Sahara, which I didn't really know about. I mean, Victor, you might know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, we will get into that later because, if you want to start, we are going to talk about the article previews. For those who don't know, Madrid Soundscape, it's a newspaper that it will feature more than 70 stories about different villages in the south of Madrid. In each episode, we will present you snippets of the most interesting ones and the ones that we think will be more attractive for you, our dear listeners, to read about. And so, Nate, we were talking about a Solidarium March in Villaconejos, and what would you like to tell us about it?
Yeah, so Yargi's article is just all about, it's going to like really touch on understanding why everybody can be a cause of this help, and like, especially since we're local journalism, this is a local newspaper, people are going to read it from Villaconejos. It's how they can collaborate and help out the Sahrawi, did I say that?
The Sahrawi people, the people from Western Sahara.
Yeah, and so it's been this long-standing crisis that's affected villagers emotionally, and so they really feel like they want to stand up for the people that they can't, or the people who can't stand up for themselves.
Do you feel surprised that a village with, I don't know how many...
3,300 people? Like
they are like marching for the Western Sahara, these thousands of kilometers away.
I was shocked. When I was researching and trying to find my stories, I saw this march and I was really confused. I thought it was like maybe outdated, or I thought it wasn't updated. But then when we got there was people like coming in and out there, and it was like we were saying, it was not a happy march, but it was peaceful, and people seemed like it was a way for the community to unite together for a common cause. And I mean, I could talk a lot more about it, but I don't want to because you guys are gonna have to read about it.
Exactly, guys. In the article made by Ilargi, you will be able to understand this exact kind of feeling of the villagers trying to be of great help and collaborate for a common cause, in this case, the Sahrawi people. We were talking also previously about transport, about commuting, about those kind of difficulties. And Fritz, do you have an interesting story for us related to that, right?
Yes, I do. So the other article is by Sophia, and it's going to talk a little bit about a kind of computer town, as they call it. It's kind of just said people only sleep there just because they commute to work.
Exactly.
And so they really only go back to maybe have dinner and sleep. A lot of people that live there are kind of like people who have passed tests to be a doctor or a nurse. So these are smart individuals. And in the article, you'll be able to see Sophia's approach on this topic as she discovers the villagers' daily reality and kind of what their life really looks like.
Yeah, what do you feel, guys, about not only El Álamo being a commuter town, but being a commuter town populated by people that I don't know how many time have they dedicated to just study for an exam, maybe 8 hours each day, and they are allocated there in this kind of villages. I don't know if do you see like a common problem or a common thread there.
Yeah, I think in the US, like for us, what I'm used to is people kind of live by where they're at. Maybe you drive 30 minutes to go to the city or something. So people are still really involved in their town and like really care about it. And like they're in the neighborhood during the weekend and whatever. Whereas, I mean, if you're gone that much and you're really focused on something else, it almost seems like there's no like soul to that city. Like if people are gone, like it's kind of just a wasteland until people come back. And so for me, I think it's really weird. Like, I don't know if I'd personally want to live there.
Exactly. I have that last question for you because before wrapping up, do you think like a village depends, in what extent do you think it depends on that soul you were talking in its inhabitants and its culture itself?
So much. I mean, I think a village is, it's the people. Like the people make the village, whether it's the political parties in the village or it's the sports teams or it's the restaurants. Like everybody's a community, and I really felt like honestly when I was in Villaconejos, everybody knew each other, and like this is something side note. Like when everybody meets everybody, it's like the kiss on one side, a kiss on that side. It's like and I know that's like a typical Spanish thing, but it just like people were.
We
so
are
happy.
very affectionate.
Yeah, but people were so exactly like people were so happy to see everybody, and especially at the soccer game, like the village was connected. And we were talking to the coach after the game. He was saying, and I'm going to talk about that in a second too. But he was saying like it was a little bit of a struggle this year for the team because everybody had games in other villages on Saturdays when the team was playing, and so the fans weren't necessarily there as much, and it made him a little bit sad. But also the players, when the fans were there, they felt that connection. They were like, this is why I'm playing. I'm playing for my village. And so I think when you have the soul in the village, people are just happier, and people really they're prideful of their village.
Yeah, I think even growing up, like my neighborhood, like kind of like the town inside my town, everyone was just friendly. Like someone's sick or someone's family member passed away, like they would bring you dinner and like come and make sure you're all right. And there was that sense of community, and you kind of always felt like you had someone to rely on. And I know people who grew up in other spots who didn't necessarily have that. Like their neighbor wasn't necessarily their friend. They kind of just lived near them and went to school and did their things outside of their town. And so that soul, I feel like, really just gives people a home base and kind of a sense of connection with their peers and the people around them, and kind of just an overall sense of security when you have a soul like that in a city.
Yeah, and I think it's just a soul with. Sorry to jump in again. I think it's a soul with everything. Like it's a soul in a classroom. It's a soul at a university. It's a soul in a sports team. It's a soul.
Yeah, that brotherhood, like it made between the people or the students or everyone.
Yeah, the brotherhood of how about the Madrid Southscape podcast that we have?
Yes, true brotherhood right here.
But I did want to mention, talking about the soul of the village. So I talked to the coach of the women's team. I think his name. Sorry, let me find his name really quick. But he played for this team, Arsenio. So he grew up in the village. He played for the team. He moved to the U.S. to coach women's soccer because, as he said, like women's soccer is just a little bit more competitive in the States. Came back to the village. He coaches for Atletico Madrid. Like he's one of their goalkeeper coaches for the younger kids. But he's so passionate about this Villaconejos team and this village, and he says it's so special to him to be able to coach for that village. So I think you have that soul, even if it's a commuter town, you still sometimes have that soul on the weekends. And like the guy Juan that I was talking to, he said people come back for the weekends, and like for him, he lives in Madrid during the week, but then on the weekends he comes back to the village and goes out and has a couple of drinks with his friends and goes to dinners, and you really just bond because of that.
Yeah, I think that's the true essence of Madrid's villages, the essence and the bond the villagers can make, and that sense of feeling of family they create. I think this has been all for today's episode. Thank you, dear listeners. We hope you've enjoyed this first immersion in the south of Madrid.
And we have so many stories to uncover and villages to discover together, so don't go away. We'll see you soon.
Don't forget to check our media for the latest updates about Madrid Southscape, and we'll see you next time.
See you.
See you later.
See ya.